say that September 25th, 2021 kind of coincides with when the Liberal government has repeatedly promised that every Canadian will be vaccinated who wants one. And so I guess you could defer that if everyone's vaccinated, we can get the economy back to normal, jobs can come flowing back, hopefully. But again, the Liberal government has not actually made that definitive promise that when everyone is vaccinated, that the economy can open up as normal and we can go back to normal. I don't know why they haven't given us some sort of either measures or indicators.
I have to interrupt the member. You will have 4 minutes to complete your speech after oral questions. Nous allons maintenant au décret.
We will now proceed to member statements.
Honourable Member for Scarborough, Rouge Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to congratulate Gramela Prasad, Executive Director of the Malvern Family Resource Centre and a community builder, on her retirement. Gramela is a friend, mentor, and a leader. I've had the honor to work with her for over 20 years, and I've witnessed the transformative work that she has undertaken. Gramela became the Executive Director of MFRC 35 years ago with just 2 employees and some rented space. Gramela advocated for MFRC to have its own building. In 2014, that dream was realized with the completion of the state-of-the-art 20,000 square feet space that offers intergenerational programming to toddlers and seniors and everyone in between. Today, she has transformed this fledgling organization to have over 65 staff and helped so many turn their lives around. Gramela is blessed with an amazing partner, Rohan, and 2 sons, Robin and Devin, and their partners. Thank you, Gramela, for making our community better, and I wish you happiness and joy as you retire and spend more time with your granddaughters, Nara.
The Honourable Member for Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Madam Speaker, March 8th was International Women's Day and marked the start of the Barrie Chamber of Commerce Women in Business Week. More than ever, we need to embrace opportunities to celebrate women who are leading and inspiring in our community. Some of the inspiring women in my community who are great role models are Barrie Police Chief Kimberly Greenwood, Barrie Deputy Fire Chief Carrie Clark, Dr. Marilyn Westmoynes, President and CEO Georgian College, Janice Scott, President and CEO of RVH Hospital, Barrie councillors Anne-Marie Kungal and Natalie Harris, Oro-Medonte councillors Tammy D'Souza and Kathy Keene, and Springwater Township Deputy Mayor Jennifer Coughlin and councillors Wanda Ma Chapman and Anita Moore. This is an amazing list of women leading my community, and I could go on, but there are too many to name in the time I have. We still have ground to cover, but I am proud to be part of a community that encourages women in positions of leadership. Thank you to all the inspiring women in leadership roles and the example you provide to all.
Honourable Member for Mississauga East Cooksville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honor and privilege for me to pay tribute to Natalie Bozzo, owner and founder of the famous San Remo Bakery. Natalie tragically passed away with COVID on February 18th. Natalie was an incredibly hardworking man, an outstanding baker. He had a passion for food that the way it could bring a smile to anyone's face. He was tough as steel and had a heart of gold. His passion was being at the bakery as he loved bringing joy to people through his food. The amount of condolence messages that have poured in these past weeks show the love that our residents truly had for this great man, great baker who was selfless and taught his family to value everything, no matter how big or small. With humble beginnings at the age of 15 in Canada to opening his own bakery, the San Remo Bakery, in 1969, Natalie had come a long way and leaves an amazing legacy behind. Our sincere condolences go out to his loving wife, Nicoletta, sons Robert, Nicholas, Edward, and the entire family.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
The world faces a global climate emergency, and the IPCC has said wealthy countries like Canada must cut their greenhouse gas emissions by at least 50% by 2030. For the last 20 years, Canada has failed to bend the curve on its GHG emissions. As Tommy Douglas said in 1971, if we could mobilize the financial and the material and the human resources of this country to fight a successful war against Nazi tyranny, we can, if we want to mobilize the same resources to fight a continual war against poverty, unemployment, and social injustice. Seth Klein, in his book, A Good War, Mobilizing Canada for the Climate Emergency, has put out 4 markers to get the job done. Spend what it takes to win, create new economic institutions such as a new generation of crown corporations to get the job done, move on voluntary and incentive-based policies to mandatory measures with clear near-term dates, and tell the truth about the severity of the crisis and what is required to rise to the challenge.
The Honourable Member for Saint Laurent.
Madame la Présidente, aujourd'hui...
Madam Speaker, today I pay tribute to Mr. Morris Cohen, a great man who left us on March 5th. He was a man of the people, appreciated by everyone. He was available, he had interpersonal skills, and he always listened. I am grateful for the support he offered me and for his great kindness. He was a borough councillor for 35 years and part of everything. He participated in the community and co-founded the first Jewish Francophone public school of the province, the Maimonides School, as well as the community center Petah Tikva. A man of both heart and action, he remains a model and an inspiration. Once again, my sincere condolences to his family. Let us remember him for everything that he brought to the community. I would like to extend my condolences to his wife and to his children.
And Albert Edmund.
Madam Speaker, last night the Liberals rammed through a radical expansion of medical assistance in dying to include mental illness, demonstrating the height of recklessness on the part of this government. After all, only months ago, the Minister of Justice said that such an expansion was fraught with risks, and yet they proceeded anyway, absent a meaningful parliamentary study, absent a consensus amongst experts, and in the face of leading mental health professionals who said that persons suffering from mental health challenges will prematurely end their lives. Last night's vote demonstrates what happens when a government puts blind ideology ahead of evidence-based decision-making. Shamefully, Canada's most vulnerable will pay the price.
The honourable member for Niagara Centre.
Madam Speaker, last week was Great Lakes Week, and to mark the occasion, legislators and advocates from Canada and the United States met to plan for the future. In Canada, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Group, which I have the honor to co-chair, held a binational, multi-partisan meeting with 75 members of Congress, Canadian MPs, senators, and binational groups such as the Great Lakes Commission, the IJC, and the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. At the core of our discussion was the benefits of binational cooperation. For example, 2022 marks 50 years since our Prime Minister's father signed the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement with our U.S. neighbors. An example of binational cooperation truly at work. Despite this example of success, there is much yet to do. Madam Speaker, the lakes are an economic engine and a binational treasure that needs our help. I look forward to the next budget and to Canada's strengthened Great Lakes commitment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Sudbury.
Madam President, as we all know, March 8th was International Women's Day. From Agnes MacPhail, the first woman elected to this chamber in 1921, to the first gender-balanced cabinet in the G7, Canada has come a long way. But there is still a long way to go before women are genuine equals, both in society and in political life. And as Speaker, not a day goes by that I don't give thanks for the strong, capable women in my life, both personally and professionally. From my mother, who put herself through university after she had children so she could become a social worker, to my wife, who runs the largest medical dermatology practice in Northern Ontario, to my daughter studying business and playing university hockey at the University of Montreal, I am blessed with role models. Reconnaissant les nombreuses femmes.
I am grateful for the many strong women in my life, and I congratulate all women for their perseverance and determination day after day. We must continue to push for equality for everyone.
Remember that empowering women and girls to equally participate in economic, social, and political life benefits everyone. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Honourable member for St. Albert. Prince Albert.
Madam Speaker, as we arrive at a sad milestone this week, the one-year anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic, Canadians are looking to the government for leadership and metrics for reopening our economy. The world has had the tools to combat this virus for some time. Rapid testing, and effective vaccines. But this government has been slow to implement both and has increased the suffering of Canadians because of it. Our businesses and exporters must make decisions for the upcoming summer and need to know what the benchmarks are for reopening. When can they travel to meet face-to-face with customers, to take orders, keep their business, and maintain their export markets? Other countries are so far ahead of Canada in terms of vaccinating their populations that our business community is at serious risk of being left behind in the global marketplace. This week, as the United States finishes fully vaccinating almost 34 million people to Canada's 500,000 people, our businesses want this Liberal government to be transparent and tell them what the criteria is being used to reopen our economy.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in this House virtually to speak to Nowruz. On Saturday, March 20th at 5:37 a.m., those of Persian, Kurdish, Turkish, Azeri, Baluch, Afghan, and Pakistani descent in my riding of Richmond Hill across Canada and the world will be welcoming spring. Join at the HoC table and celebrate the New Year in Persian calendar. Next Tuesday night, at the Chasham Suri Fire Festival before Nowruz, many families will participate in the practice of jumping over the fire, chanting, Zardi man asto, Sorkhi to az man. As we jump over the fire and light the candles at our HoC tables, we hope that the light and reviving of the nature will take away all the darkness and sorrow of the past year and bring forth lightness, hope, health, and prosperity. بدین شایستگی جشنی بدین بایستگی روزی شما را در جهان هر روز جشنی باد و نوروزی هر روزتان نوروز نوروزتان پیروز با درود. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Fundy Royal.
Madam Speaker, yesterday the Liberals invoked closure on their motion that significantly altered Bill C-7 by expanding medical assistance death to those with mental illness. They did so at the absolute last moment possible in the parliamentary process. I've received hundreds of emails, letters, and calls in opposition to Bill C-7, in particular from persons with disabilities and groups that advocate for them. Many of them wanted more time to speak out in committee against Bill C-7. Now the government has expanded Bill C-7 so that MAID will be accessible to those with mental illness. This was done with no consultation directly on this issue in the House of Commons. I call upon the government to actually listen to those who are raising concerns with their changes made by Bill C-7, be willing to address them through the upcoming parliamentary review.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, the Liberal Firearms Bill C-21 will ban outright all airsoft guns, most BB guns, and some paintball models in Canada, toys. But it's not just a plan to destroy a pastime enjoyed by over 64,000 players in Canada. The Liberal law risks an entire industry worth $100 million to the Canadian economy, $10 million in Quebec alone. Half the businesses in Canada tailored to these harmless hobbies expect to close for good. That includes businesses in Lakeland like Excalibur Paintball in Boyle, Alberta. Many business owners say Bill C-21 is the bitter end of airsoft and paintball in Canada, and that includes most BB guns, which most of us probably remember Target shooting pop cans with as kids. Because of these Liberals, 1,500 Canadians will likely lose their jobs. And for what? So this is the Liberal plan, taking legal firearms off the ranges, banning toys while leaving illegal guns in the hands of gangs and criminals and reducing penalties for serious and violent crimes. It just makes no sense.
Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
Madam Speaker, my office is receiving hundreds of messages every day on dental care. One senior said, I live on a tight budget. In January of this year, I needed serious dental surgery. To afford the $1,800, she's living frugally, cutting her own hair, turning down her heat, walking rather than driving. Marissa needs over $4,000 worth of dental work, but she gets only $1,000 for dental every 2 years on disability, and she is in extreme pain. Diane in Powell River worked for 41 years in an office, and her retirement income is $1,400 a month. Every 6 months, she pays the $264, which she cannot afford to take care of her teeth. She needs to replace 2 old fillings, but at almost $400, how? Many constituents have said their last visit to the dentist was 5 years or more, some as long as 15 years ago. It is time that we add dental care to the mix. Canadians are suffering without it. People's health depend on it.
Honorable député de Rivière-des-Mille-Îles.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, I wish to highlight the extraordinary initiative of a business in my riding. Christy Inamet and Mr. Martin donated 16 laptops to community organizations. I am proud that my team and I have played this role of facilitator. That means that seniors, handicapped individuals, people experiencing homelessness will see increased access to the world thanks to these tools. The business opened the door to other donations in the next few months, but even better, employees are following this example of generosity and have decided to offer some volunteer time to the community. This exceptional collaboration allows us to draw more closely the social safety net around those in need in my riding. This makes a difference and is a great example to follow. Thank you, Mr. Roy. The Honourable Member for Louis-Saint-Laurent. Mr. Jocelyn Paul has just been promoted to the rank of Lieutenant General of the Canadian Army. We've known each other since we were teens, and he's a Huron-Wendat from Wendake, proud of his roots and his nation. Soldier for 35 years, he has always served with honour and dignity. On my Facebook page, I received hundreds of comments, including one from Patrick Bédard, who served with him in Afghanistan in 2009. After his return to Canada, Jocelyn took the time to come to the house and see how I was doing, how I was adapting and healing. He also talked with my spouse and children. I appreciated his gesture, and it showed the very human side of this warrior. Nearly 3,000 members of various First Nations serve in our armed forces. There are measures in place to recruit them, such as the Carcajou program launched by Luc Obomsawin, an Abenaki man who unfortunately died last year. Jocelyn said that when I talk to young Indigenous people about having a career in the armed forces, I tell them what you're doing by going to the armed forces is what our ancestors have always been doing. Lieutenant General Jocelyn Paul is a source of pride and inspiration for our nation, army, and country. Bravo, my general.
Wellington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to thank the countless women and men in Halton Region and across Canada who are working nonstop to get our seniors and most vulnerable vaccinated. As of March 11th, 17,884 Halton residents 80 years of age or older have booked their appointments to get vaccinated. Hardworking Halton paramedics like Lindsay Henderson and Vanessa Viss, led by Greg Sage, and Halton public health staff led by Dr. Hamadi Magani have been vaccinating seniors and priority healthcare workers daily and will continue to do so as more vaccines roll into Halton. I also want to thank my colleague, the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, who has worked tirelessly to bring vaccines to Canada. This week, Halton Region will be receiving their first shipment of Moderna and an increase in vaccines in the following weeks. Thanks to everyone who continues to keep us safe. Together, we will get through this.
Questions orales, oral questions, l'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Louis-Saint-Laurent. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, there's another troubling situation for our armed forces. Yesterday on CBC, retired sergeant gave disturbing testimony. He said that officers regularly interfere in ongoing investigations concerning sexual assault. And whereas the reporting rate in civil society is 42%, in the Army it's only 14%. When will the government take serious measures to deal with this issue in the Army? The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, we have no tolerance for any form of sexual misconduct. This is something we take very, very seriously. I want to acknowledge the courage of the survivors who have come forward. The Minister has always ensured that any allegations that are brought to his attention have been reported to the appropriate authorities to begin investigations regardless of rank or position. Every person deserves a safe work environment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Louis-Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, if the government was really serious, as they said, well, they wouldn't have appointed someone who just a few weeks later had to resign because he was under investigation. Now, this week on TVA, retired General Lantier did not mince words. He said this is a terrible shock for the institution, a significant crisis. It hurts the credibility in the institution. Madam Speaker, why would a former retired general be so outraged to see it's understandable he's so outraged to see how the government is handling the situation. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, our government has no tolerance for sexual misconduct. It is absolutely unacceptable that there would be these allegations and that anyone coming forward with a complaint would be threatened. While Institutional cultural change is complex and takes time. It is important to have zero tolerance here. We want to make sure that anyone who wants to come forward is comfortable doing so. Women and men, all forms of Canadians have our support. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, it's incredible to hear the member saying that, we need patience here, because for 3 years, the Minister of Defence knew that there was a problem and did nothing. For 3 years, the Prime Minister said that he knew nothing, but later he said that actually his office did know and they did nothing. And when you look at retired Lieutenant Generals saying that this makes no sense, well, it's time for the government to take action. Now, the Prime Minister is so sensitive to his personal image, but does he know that currently Canada's image abroad has been tarnished by this irresponsible government? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Speaker, what I said is that we can't be patient anymore. This does deserve our attention, and in fact, after having been informed, having informed the Minister of Concerns, the former Ombudsman was contacted by the PCO to open an investigation. Politicians should not be leading investigations. Every allegation of sexual misconduct and harassment is always referred to the appropriate authorities. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For Portage Lisgar.
I cannot believe, Mr. Speaker, that parliamentary secretary standing up and defending the actions of the Prime Minister of this country and the Minister of Defense of this country when they not only turned a blind eye, but they continued to cover up these serious allegations. And maybe she can say it wasn't their responsibility to investigate, but it was the Prime Minister's responsibility and the Minister of Defense's responsibility to follow through and ensure that it was investigated, that this woman was taken seriously, that she was not disregarded, and by doing so, shaming and hurting all
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as the Minister has said repeatedly, any allegations that were brought forward were immediately put to the proper authorities. In fact, the very next day, after informing the Minister of his concerns, the former Ombudsman was contacted by PCO to begin an investigation. Politicians, I think we all agree, are not the ones who should be conducting these kinds of investigations. Every single investigation of sexual misconduct and harassment is always referred to the appropriate authorities. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Portage Lisgar.
Well, it turns out the way this Prime Minister and the Minister of Defence handled General Vance's allegations is basically how they handle most sexual misconduct. By doing the worst thing a leader can do when faced with harassment allegations. Say, not a big deal, maybe she experienced it differently, then cover it up, claim it's not their job, and allow it to continue. That's what these two Liberal men did, this Prime Minister and this Minister of Defence. There is no defence for it. Why did they fail the men and women in uniform so badly?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we know it is evident in the Canadian Armed Forces that there are cultural problems of intolerance, harassment, and abuse, which is completely unacceptable. We are examining various measures to ensure that there are tangible supports for those who come forward with allegations of assault or harassment. It is clear that the measures that we have done already, and those are many, since being in government, haven't gone far enough. They haven't moved fast enough. As we have stated, the time for patience is over, and we will move faster. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, on March 25th, the Government of Quebec will table its budget. That means that there is less than 2 weeks for the federal government to announce that it will do its part in order to increase the health transfers. Madam Speaker, we're entering into year 2 of COVID-19. It's important to repeat, this is a public health crisis. This is a fight being led by health staff, and that means that there are costs involved. Will the government announce before March 25th that it will increase the health transfers? The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the Honourable Member for the question. Your governments at all levels are working together to keep Canadians safe from COVID-19. As part of our response to the pandemic, we announced our $19 billion Safe Restart Agreement to help provinces and territories restart their economies safely while we continue to respond to COVID-19. This funding is in addition to the $40 billion we already provide to provinces and territories each year through the Canada Health Transfer. We will keep working with the provinces and territories so that we can fight COVID-19 together.
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Madam Speaker, we're talking about health transfers, so I'll try again. Quebec is tabling its budget on the 25th, Ontario on the 24th. So again, Quebec and all of the provinces are calling on the federal government to do its fair share by increasing the health transfers. If the government doesn't announce at least its intention to increase the health transfers within the next 2 weeks, that means that Quebec and the provinces will have to start making difficult choices to cover for the federal government's underfunding. Will the government announce that it will be noticing that the pandemic is putting this pressure on health staff? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Since the beginning of this pandemic, we've sent billions to support provinces and territories through the Safe Restart Agreement and to help healthcare systems across the country. We provided additional support in the fall economic statement, and we will continue to be there for Canadians, all Canadians, to keep them safe from COVID-19.
The Honourable Député.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Madam Speaker, last November, during his appearance on the show Tout le monde en parle, the Minister of Heritage said that the web giants will finally be taxed starting in the next budget. But well, guess what? The Liberal government has just said they won't be tabling a budget in March, so it's been postponed again. In the end, it's not just the Prime Minister who wants a spring election. The web bandits, who are raking in huge profits year after year, must be on their knees climbing the stairs of St. Joseph's Oratory right now, praying that they can continue saving billions of dollars in taxes. Mr. Minister, you promised Quebecers to tax web giants quickly. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
We all have a choice of whether to complain or to take action for change. Our Broadcast Act hasn't been revised since 1991, when we were still renting movies from stores rather than streaming services. Times have changed, and we are modernizing the Broadcasting Act to make sure that web giants pay their fair share for our Canadian stories and music. I hope that the member opposite will be willing to commit extra hours at committee so that we can act together for the necessary changes to our outdated Broadcasting Act.
Honourable Member for North Island Powell River.
Madam Speaker, BC prawn fishers are worried about their livelihoods as DFO is changing its interpretation of prawn fishing regulations, which have been in place for 50 years with no issues. In 2 days alone, I have received over 1,000 emails from my region. Changing the regulations without reason or warning would be devastating. Will the minister explain what is happening in DFO? How many announcements will she make with no plan in place? And will she give assurance to workers that their jobs are not on the line?
The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government supports a careful approach to fisheries management that would focus on health and sustainability. Monitoring in the shrimp harvest is a cautious approach here because it allows us to ensure that shrimp are harvested sustainably. We know that the next season will be a transitional one, and we need to work together to find a long-term solution.
Merci, Madame.
The Honourable Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Madame la Présidente, la semaine dernière.
Madam Speaker, last week, the European Union and the United States announced joint sanctions against those responsible for imprisoning Alexei Navalny and other protesters. But Canada was absent. Activist Vladimir Kara-Murza said that Canada's absence was concerning and inexplicable. Why doesn't this government work with our allies to maintain the international order, which is based on rules?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam President. Canada strongly supports the decision made by the United States and the EU on the adoption of sanctions against Russian officials responsible for arbitrary detention, prosecution, and the attempted assassination of Alexei Navalny. 2 of the 4 individuals targeted by the EU have already been sanctioned by Canada. And when it comes to further sanctions from Canada, All options are on the table, and we continue to call on Russian authorities to immediately release Mr. Navalny and all those detained for exercising their rights of freedom of speech and of assembly.
Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Well, Madam Speaker, the government isn't acting multilaterally. Last month, the FBI placed Russian oligarch Yevgeny Prigozhin on its most wanted list for interfering in the 2016 U.S. election. Twitter released evidence that Prigozhin's Internet Research Agency has targeted Canada with thousands of disinformation tweets. Oligarchs target Canada with disinformation, target members of this government, and undermine our democracy, yet the government fails to sanction them. Why is this government not working multilaterally and joining our allies in applying Magnitsky sanctions on oligarchs like Prigozhin?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as I said, we have already targeted 2 individuals with sanctions that the EU had on their list. We'll continue to keep every option on the table, as we will continue to work multilaterally, as we will continue to express our strong concern that Russian authorities immediately release Mr. Navalny, immediately allow those who are being detained to exercise their rights of freedom of speech and assembly. We'll continue to do this, and we will do it multilaterally in constant conversation.
Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Madam Speaker, last month, Parliament recognized a genocide against Muslims is taking place in China. This week, a coalition of experts, including 2 former Liberal ministers of justice and a former Liberal minister of foreign affairs, concluded that a genocide is taking place. This week, the United States called out China at the United Nations for this genocide. Yesterday, Romeo Dallaire, who witnessed the Rwandan genocide, said a genocide is taking place and the government must act. When will this government recognize that a genocide is taking place in China?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I thank the member for his question. I think he knows that I take this issue very seriously, as does our government. We're aware of the independent reports. We're aware of comments made by others, and we will continue to address the situation that has been addressed by this Parliament. We take these issues seriously. As we have repeatedly said, we'll remain deeply disturbed by troubling reports of human rights violations in Xinjiang, and we take allegations of genocide very seriously. And we'll work in collaboration with allies and others to make sure that we have those opinions expressed clearly and strongly to China.
Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le Madam Speaker, last week the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans announced that an Indigenous fishery will now be authorized after fishing rights were granted to traditional fishermen in the Maritimes and in Quebec. This led to an outcry from all of the coastal communities concerned, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike, who deplore the fact that they were never consulted. After this rushed declaration, what measures will be put in place to ensure the sustainability of all coastal communities that depend on the same resource?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government is committed to an approach based on the recognition of treaty rights and conservation and sustainability, as well as stable and transparent fisheries management. The rules need to be applied to all fishers, and this means that the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans will work together with all stakeholders in order to ensure that that fishing happens safely and sustainably for everyone.
Member for Tobique-Mactaquac.
Madam Speaker, on March 3rd, DFO tweeted a statement from the Fisheries Minister that was supposed to be, and I quote, "a new path for First Nations who want to fish in pursuit of a moderate livelihood this season. Indigenous and non-Indigenous harvesters have rejected the minister's statement, and now she is the only one on her new path. No Canadian wants to see a repeat of the chaos that this minister's mismanagement created last fall, but her inability to provide any clarity is only increasing uncertainty and tensions. And we know that where there's uncertainty, there will be instability. When will the minister provide a clear and full plan for implementing treaty rights for the sake of all harvesters?"
Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The court affirmed of the First Nations fishing rights, and we have never stopped working to implement that right. This allows First Nations to safely exercise their fishing rights this season before the conclusion of the final treaty. Fish stocks can be fished in a sustainable manner, and the approach must always be based on conservation and sustainability.
Honourable member for West Nova.
Madam Speaker, on March 3rd, the Minister of Fisheries issued a statement that was supposedly meant to bring clarity and certainty ahead of the spring lobster fishery. This 180-degree change in direction has failed to set a path that would bring back peace, security, and fairness for all participants in the lobster fishery. Now, we didn't get an answer to the member for Tobique-Mactaquac, but can the minister confirm today in this House when the details of her so-called interim plan will be finally disclosed?
Honourable Minister.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government is committed to an approach based on the recognition of Indigenous treaty rights, conservation, sustainability, and sustainable and transparent fisheries management. The lobster stocks are healthy, and this season we will ensure that they are harvested sustainably and transparently. All fishers, including First Nations fishers, are focused on conservation and will all be encouraged to fish peacefully. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thousands of people learned that they had been victims of fraud with the CERB and that they'll have to pay tax. Obviously, the CRA is investigating, and at the end of the investigation, the victims won't have to pay the tax. But the investigation has been dragging on, and the deadline for filing taxes is approaching. So the CRA is saying, well, pay now and we'll pay you back later. But the government caused this fraud. They chose not to verify the identities of CERB applicants. So can they give victims a break while the investigation happens? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madame la Présidente. L'Agence de Revenu.
The Canada Revenue Agency takes this issue very seriously. We have set up measures to avoid fraudulent claims. Canadians who receive a T4A for CERB payments can contact the CRA as soon as possible. Victims of fraud will not be held responsible for the money.
Témiscamingue.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Clearly, the Parliamentary Secretary hasn't been working with the CRA here. The victims of fraud don't have to pay money on they didn't receive, even if Ottawa is promising to reimburse them. People saw what happened with the Phoenix Pay system, so they have no idea how many months or years or centuries they'll have to wait to get their money back. The government decided not to verify the identities of CERB applicants, and it's their choice that they should take responsibility. Now, will they leave the victims of fraud alone until the investigation is concluded? Thank you. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, and I'll repeat these lines in English just so I'm clear. The Canadian Revenue Agency takes the protection of taxpayer information very seriously. We have put in place robust safeguards in place to identify fraudulent emergency and recovery claims. We will work with the victims of fraud, and they will not be held responsible for any money paid out to scammers using their identity. Thank you, Madame la Présidente.
The Honourable Member for Lakeland.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals defend their hotel quarantine program despite reports of sexual assault, scarce food and water, unsafe living conditions, and unanswered calls for help. This week, the Liberals admitted they had no science or data to back up their hotel quarantine rule in the first place. But the Public Safety Minister also said home quarantines are, quote, working. So the only evidence the Liberals really have is this. Their mandatory hotel quarantine puts Canadians in danger. Will they shut it down right now?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Canada has some of the strictest travel and border measures in the world. But with new variants of concern, we know that we need to take further steps to protect Canadians from COVID-19 and COVID-19 variants. We've been clear from the start of this pandemic, Madam Speaker, that no one should be traveling. Doing so can put you and your loved ones at risk. We will always act
to protect Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Skyview.
Madam Speaker, throughout this pandemic, we have consistently seen this government institute policies without taking into consideration the impact it has on women. The government's continual refusal to do a GBA Plus analysis on their policies has resulted in women being placed in unsafe isolation scenarios that leave them vulnerable without the assurances they need to feel protected. When will this Liberal government suspend their hotel quarantine and do a rigorous review of this policy, including a GBA Plus analysis, to ensure women are safe and secure?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the member opposite for her question and thank her for her hard work and passion on the GBA and the women's file. I'd like to give her confidence that since 2018, the GBA Lens Plus has been put on every guiding framework for budgeting processes in Canada. It promotes equality throughout the federal budget process. And since 2015, nearly 200,000 public servants, parliamentarians, and parliamentary staff have taken the GBA Plus. I encourage everyone to do so. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Yellowhead.
Madam Speaker, the government has completely bungled their quarantine hotel scheme. Conservatives have been calling for a post-arrival testing regime since the beginning. The Calgary International Airport pilot project showed that this could be done successfully. I recently met with travel agents to discuss the impacts of COVID on the sector and their path to recovery. Madam Speaker, when will the government abandon their failed hotel quarantine debacle and instead implement post-arrival testing?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, Canada has some of the strictest travel and border measures in the world. Again, new variants of concern have made it very important that we take further steps to protect Canadians from COVID-19. We've been clear from the start of this pandemic that no one should be traveling. We have to get that message through. Doing so can put you and your loved ones at risk. Madam Speaker, from the start, we've had the safety and health of Canadians in mind, and we will always act to protect that.
Honourable Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
Madam Speaker, with all due respect, the answer to that question is absolute garbage. Get off the talking points. Canadians can, returning, drive across the border and avoid this quarantine hotel. It is politics above science. We actually have something that will work. Rapid testing for pre-departure and arrivals. When will the government admit this is politics over science and cancel this horrendous hotel quarantine program?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, just for a moment, let me clarify that it's that party on that side of the House that has always put politics over science. From day one, our response to COVID-19 has been guided by science and evidence. We're working closely with provinces and territories to ensure that they have the tools to respond to COVID-19, and that includes millions of items of PPE, rapid tests, millions and millions and millions of rapid tests, Madam Speaker, and on-the-ground support through the Canadian Red Cross. Gives me a moment, Madam Speaker, to thank our amazing healthcare workers, caregivers, and essential workers for their tireless efforts in these challenges.
Honourable Member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, Canada has missed every single climate target. We are the only G7 country whose emissions have actually increased instead of decreased since the Paris Agreement. The world's top climate scientists are telling us that the next 10 years are the most important. We need climate action, a just transition for workers, and climate accountability now, not a decade from now. The Liberals promised milestone targets every 5 years, but then left 2025 out of their climate bill. Are they that scared of accountability, or do they not agree that the next 10 years are the most critical? Why won't the Prime Minister commit to a 2025 target?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act has robust accountability and transparency. Just to name a few aspects, a legally binding process for the federal government to set climate targets and bring forward plans to meet those targets, rigorous ongoing progress reports, yearly reports by the independent advisory body, ongoing audits by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, just to name a few. The Minister has been very clear in his willingness to consider amendments, but those amendments can only begin to be considered by the committee. I hope that the member and her party and other climate supporting MPs in this House join us in moving this bill to committee as soon as possible.
Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Madam Speaker, on Wednesday, more than 30 organizations called on the Prime Minister to support a temporary waiver of certain intellectual property rights at the World Trade Organization. The TRIPS provisions treat vaccine technology and knowledge as the private property of pharmaceutical companies, but the research was paid for with over $100 billion of public funds from across the world, including Canada. The purpose of the vaccine isn't to pad the pockets of multinational corporations. It's to protect public health and get the economy back on track. So when will the Liberals stop putting profit before people and sign on to this important initiative?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, allow me to thank my honourable colleague for his question. It is important for our government that there is a just global recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Canada is a strong proponent of multilateral rules-based system within the WTO context. We're committed to ensuring strong, resilient global medical supply chains and have reached out to the waiver proponents to better understand their concerns. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Scarborough Centre.
Madam Speaker, this week we are celebrating women and the role they play in our society. While we have made a lot of progress towards equality, we know we have a lot of work left to do. The COVID-19 pandemic is disproportionately impacting women as well as racialized and Indigenous communities. Some are calling it She Session. In December, the government launched the 2030 Challenge to encourage gender parity and representation at the decision-making table. Could the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry please provide an update on this program? Thank you, Madam
Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her tireless advocacy and for her very timely question. Research, as she knows full well, shows that diversity in leadership leads to better business outcomes. To this end, our government launched the 50-30 Challenge several months ago. This program seeks to amplify the voices of women and other underrepresented groups in our corporate boardroom. And the member will be happy to know, as will other Canadians, that to date, 1,000 Canadian companies across our country have not only...
Member for Kildonan St. Paul.
In 2018, the Liberals attempted to cut $2.5 million from the Canadian Institute for the Blind's Accessible Book Program, but the disability community fought back. Nonprofits NELS and CELA now administer the program and provide 3 million Canadians with reading disabilities access to books and resources at no extra cost to them. This year, in the middle of the pandemic, the Liberals plan to cut $4 million from NELS and CELA that provide Canadians with disabilities access to Braille, audiobooks, and other accessible reading materials. This cut is just wrong, Madam Speaker. Will the minister commit to restoring their funding, yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the very important question. We strongly believe that everyone should be able to access information and reading material, and that's why we signed on to the Marrakesh Treaty 4 years ago, and why we have been working closely with all stakeholders, including disability groups and the publishing industry, on an agreed-upon plan to transition the industry to one where books are born accessible. We know that the pandemic has impacted the timeline and the realization of this transition, and we are working with stakeholders to ensure that they are supported and alternate format materials remain available. I am confident, Madam Speaker, that we will find a solution.
The Honourable Member for Bruce Grey Owen.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. He didn't answer the question. Many seniors across Canada are like my 98-year-old grandmother living in long-term care homes with limited social and family contact that has been further reduced by the pandemic. Many have visual impairments or are legally blind. They're dependent on much-needed accessible reading materials that are provided through CELA and NELS organizations. This is even more critical in rural Canada where access and resources are limited. Yet this Liberal government has decided to cut $4 million in essential funding for them. Why? My 98-year-old grandmother and millions of Canadians want to know.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I thank the honourable member for the important question. As I stated prior, we strongly believe that everyone should be able to access information and reading material. I am confident, Madam Speaker, that we will find a solution that keeps us on the path to accessible publishing, and we will continue to work with our partners in the disability community to make sure that we have a barrier-free and accessible Canada. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Madam Speaker, to demands of Canada's Iranian and Jewish communities that Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps be added to Canada's list of terror groups, the minister deflected, saying 4 proxy IRGC agencies, including the Quds Force, are already listed. That listing, by the way, was in 2012 by our Conservative government. But when this House voted overwhelmingly to list the IRGC in its entirety, the member for Scarborough Southwest cast a yea vote. Madam Speaker, can the Minister of Public Safety explain his change of mind?
Honorable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The list is an important tool in preventing crimes in Canada. And we depend on our agencies to add new entities to the list. Our intelligence and law enforcement agencies do incredible work to protect Canadians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Madam Speaker, Essex-Windsor has one of the largest advanced manufacturing hubs in Canada. Over $3.3 billion in GDP, 1,000 plus manufacturers creating thousands of high-paying jobs. This does not include those servicing these businesses, its supply chain, and those who export their services to the U.S., another $1 billion in GDP. When will this government end punitive measures at the border and designate the owners, employees, and customers of these businesses essential commerce?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'm happy to take this question from my colleague because supporting small businesses and our exporters is exactly what this government has been doing since day one of the pandemic. I'd be happy to sit down with my colleague opposite to discuss these particular issues, but let me remind all members of this House of the fantastic news that we received this morning regarding our job numbers. We have now the lowest unemployment rate since the start of the pandemic. This is good news for Canadian workers and our exporters, and I would like to thank all Canadians for helping us create 260,000 jobs in February.
L'honorable député de Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, when it comes to business models, there's nothing more typically Quebec than sugar shacks. Maybe it's too typically Quebec, in fact, because when the Bloc raised the issue several times, the problem that sugar shacks are falling through the cracks of the business assistance programs, well, Ottawa didn't even seem to know what we were talking about. Sugar shacks make their entire revenue in 2 months in the spring, which means that after losing their entire season in 2020 during the first wave, they are now going to lose their revenue for a second year during the second wave. When will the government implement specific assistance for sugar shacks? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We all want to support our sugar shacks. We know how important this industry is in Quebec. I would like to remind my colleague and all Quebecers that today the unemployment rate in Quebec is 6.2%. That is similar to pre-COVID times, and we are very proud of our entrepreneurs who own sugar shacks and who are continuing to work hard in order to create jobs. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, we need to act now. Things are urgent for sugar shacks because if the government doesn't do something, 75% of sugar shacks might go bankrupt this spring. As the season begins, I would like to remind the government that most of the Quebec population is still in red zones. Sugar shacks may lose their entire revenue for 2 years in a row, and there is no federal assistance tailored for their reality. Madam Speaker, we're talking about part of Quebec identity and part of our heritage. It's appreciated the world over, and it may disappear. When will the minister take action? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I agree with my colleague. Sugar shacks are an important sector in the rural regions of Quebec. We want to help them through our various programs, as we've done with many other small businesses. I'd like to also say that there was a record year in maple production last year, and so we would like to congratulate people in the sector, and I'd also like to encourage all my colleagues to participate in the My Sugar Shack at Home initiative. That's a good way to support them.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals are seeking to target law-abiding firearms owners with onerous new rules, all the while eliminating mandatory jail time for serious firearms offenses, including weapons trafficking and robbery with a gun. Why is it that when the Liberals talk about getting tough on guns, they mean getting tough on law-abiding Canadians while going soft on criminals?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Et ça pourrait difficilement être plus faux. On ne s'en prend d'aucune manière aux propriétaires d'armes à feu légitimes.
Madam Speaker, that is not true. Rather, we are not planning to hurt law-abiding firearm owners. We know that the Conservatives want to weaken firearm protections in Canada. We, on the other hand, will strengthen them, and we are investing in our border services as well as law enforcement agencies like the RCMP in order to crack down on traffickers and offenders, and we will further crack down on firearm smuggling. These measures will help us better control firearms. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Well, since it's Friday today, I have an easy question for the Liberals. Who is going to pay the federal debt? Since the Liberals have been in power, all they've done is plunge this country into debt. Money has been spent in immense amounts. The debt is going up, and what's going to happen? Well, Canadians will have to pay for this debt, and the interest bill will be very high. So my question is simple. When will the Liberals table a clear plan for our economic recovery in order to protect future generations? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci pour la question, Madame la Présidente.
The interpreter apologizes, but the quality of the sound does not permit interpretation.
Important pour eux de décider.
L'honorable ministre a des difficultés de.
I'm sorry, there are some connection issues. I'm sorry, we can barely hear you, Minister.
Issues, Minister. We are hearing you very badly and in slow motion.
Est-ce que je dois continuer ou...
Should I continue?
Notre collègue de répondre.
Hein? Oh oui, ça serait mieux de changer, s'il vous plaît. L'honorable leader du gouvernement à la Chambre.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I will answer my colleague for Lévis. Well, I would ask him, where would he decide to cut? Because we have taken action to help society. Seniors, youth, families, CERB, the wage subsidy, those are examples of our programs. We don't want to leave anyone behind. We want to be there for Canadians. So what I would ask my colleague is, where would he decide to cut?
For Cypress Hills grasslands.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Once again, Canada could fall behind with the Liberals' weaker version of NAFTA. After a 3-year grace period, there will be tariffs if we don't regionally source the vast majority of lithium for electric vehicles. The government makes big plans and promises for a green transition, but there's a problem. Approval for new projects will take at least 3 to 10 years. The Anti-Pipeline Impact Assessment Act is also creating uncertainty for the Liberals' green transition. Will the Liberals finally admit it's time to repeal Bill C-69?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his question. We've committed to Canadians that we would not only take action to reduce our GHG emissions and not only meet but exceed our Paris Agreement targets, but that we'd also do so by growing the economy at the same time. And that's what we are delivering on and have delivered on over the last 5 to 6 years. Just look at our most recent strengthened climate plan, Madam Speaker, which not only shows in detail how we are going to reach and exceed our Paris Agreement targets, but also shows how we're going to create well-paying jobs in the process. It's what Canadians expect from us, and it's exactly what we're going to deliver on.
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Louis.
Nous avons tous reconnu.
Madam Speaker, over the last year, we've all learned that it's important to be active and be able to move around while, of course, respecting health guidelines. Canadians are starting to think about investments that could enable us to start a solid, sustainable economic recovery. That's why I was pleased to learn that significant federal funding will be earmarked for active transport. Can the Minister of Infrastructure tell us more about how the Government of Canada will support expanding community pathways throughout the country? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I'd like to thank the member for his question. Madam Speaker, we are the first federal government to earmark $400 million to building and expanding better pedestrian and cycling pathways. Active transportation is pleasant and healthy, and it's also better for the environment. It enables Canadians to save money, and it makes communities more accessible and connected. These are projects that can be implemented rapidly, and they create jobs and economic growth, while also creating healthy and better connected communities.
Honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Enbridge's Line 5 is critical national infrastructure, but like the entire Canadian resource sector, it faces phasing out because of the Liberals' energy policy. The minister said, quote, "We are fighting for Line 5, end quote. But Canadians are asking if the Liberals actually back this pipeline, or is it simply another hollow and hypocritical promise like their failed silence on Keystone XL? Or maybe they only care about fighting when it affects regions of the country where they actually get a few votes."
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, Line 5 is non-negotiable. People will not be left out in the cold. There are hundreds of thousands of homes on both sides of the border that depend on it for heating. Tens of thousands of jobs on both sides of the border depend on it. We take threats to Canadian energy security very seriously. We are standing up for energy workers. Crude oil exports, by the way, are at pre-pandemic volumes, 4 straight months of GDP growth with 6.1% growth in the last quarter. That's the largest of any sector in our economy by far. We are proud of our energy workers. They are leading the way. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Fundy Royal.
Madam Speaker, this government has indicated they plan to finally move forward with a parliamentary review of Canada's medical assistance in dying legislation, nearly 1 year late. Persons with disabilities and mental health advocates are worried that their concerns will continue to be ignored. They are concerned that engaging in the process will be a waste of their time. Can the minister confirm that all options will be on the table with this review, including reversing some of the changes pushed through in Bill C7?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I thank the member opposite for that question. Yesterday, we moved a very important step closer to passing the critical changes to medical assistance in dying through Bill C7. We listened through this process to more than 300,000 Canadians. We heard from countless experts, spent more than 45 hours of debate on this important legislation, but the job is clearly not done yet. We finally brought, unfortunately, obstruction by the official opposition, the Conservative Party, to an end in this House. Now it's up to the other place, the Senate, to complete this bill's journey so that these critical changes can become law and that suffering can end for Canadians. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Speaker, last night Canadians watched on the Fifth Estate as Jessica Miller revealed her experiences of sexual abuse by a superior while at sea. Under the guise of Operation Honour, she hoped for justice. Instead, like so many others, her perpetrator received a code of conduct discipline violation, no criminal charges, and a move on the posting to his choice. The minister sat on his hands for 3 years after learning of sexual misconduct allegations against General Vance. Why is he failing to protect women in the military?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, we know that every single woman who serves this country in the Canadian Armed Forces deserves to be safe while doing so. We have no tolerance for misconduct. It is unacceptable that anyone with these allegations of assault or harassment who come forward be themselves victims of bullying or threats. Though institutional culture is complex and takes time, as I've said earlier, the time for patience is over. We need to make sure that everyone who comes forward feels comfortable doing so, and I encourage them to come forward. Thank you.
Honorable Député d'Alfred Pellin.
The Honourable Member for Alfred Pellin.
Seniors have faced immense difficulty during the pandemic. They've needed extra support to deal with the challenges created by COVID-19. The New Horizons for Seniors program is an example of the community-level projects we can fund to make the difference in people's lives. Can the Minister of Seniors please tell us what this program is doing for seniors in my riding and across Canada who need support in their day-to-day lives? Thank you.
Honourable Minister.
I will take it, Madam Chair.
Honourable Member, for his important question and for his advocacy on behalf of seniors. The pandemic has been hard on all of us, but it has been hardest on seniors because they are at greater risk. Our government was able to quickly enable organizations to modify New Horizons for Seniors projects. Our fantastic community partners took projects that were meant to be done in person and moved them online. Or groceries. Total, we funded over 2,000 New Horizons Seniors weeks. We'll have more to announce for additional projects to support seniors across the country. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Madam Speaker, the government failed to take action on the systemic racism against Mi'kmaq fishers in Nova Scotia. And now, instead of engaging in a nation-to-nation relationship, the government is imposing unilateral decisions on them that continue a pattern of paternalistic and oppressive behavior. This isn't reconciliation. The minister has failed to protect Mi'kmaq fishers and uphold treaty rights, and her latest decision could lead to more harm and violence against Indigenous people. If this is this government's most important relationship, when will the minister reverse her unjust decision that will punish Mi'kmaq fishers?
Honourable Minister.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. La Cour suprême a affirmé.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Supreme Court has reaffirmed Indigenous fishing rights, and we will continue to work to implement that right. This means permitting First Nations to exercise their rights safely this year while a final agreement is being negotiated. We must also guarantee that stocks are fished in a sustainable manner, and all measures must be based on stock conservation and transparent fisheries management. Thank you.
For Kitchener South, Hespeler.
Madam Speaker, we know that reliable public transportation will be essential as we build toward economic recovery. Public transit links can widen people's job search area, and it's essentially important for lower income groups who lack access to vehicles. Tech companies in Waterloo region have also advocated for increased public transportation, as high-skilled workers are more likely to travel across longer distances for well-paying jobs. Can the minister please explain what the government is doing to help ensure we have cleaner and more sustainable transit?
Honorable Ministre.
Madam Speaker, I would like to thank the member for Kitchener South Hespeler for his commitment to public transit. Good transit, like the Ion LRT in Kitchener-Waterloo, helps people get around the community, whether you are heading downtown to the university or over to the Kitchener market. This is about getting cars off the road so people don't waste time and money in traffic polluting our air. Last month, our government announced almost $15 billion in new funding for public transit to support major projects like subways, LRTs, zero-emission buses, and bike and walking paths. That funding will start immediately so we can create good jobs building out public transit all across Canada.
And that is all the time for oral questions. The Honourable Member for Kingston and the Islands, rising on a point of order.
Yeah, on a point of order, Madam Speaker, I'm rising to respond to the point of order raised by the member from Mission Mesquite, Fraser Cannon, respecting an error in Bill C-19, an act to amend the Canada Elections Act COVID-19 response. While it is unfortunate that the English language in clause 239 subsection 2 contain an error, the French language in 239 subsection 2 is indeed the correct version. The government intends to address this inconsistency at committee. In his intervention, the member refers to Standing Order 68 subsection 3 respecting blank or imperfect bills. This standing order, which dates back to Confederation, was added to the rules of the House to address extreme situations where a blank or imperfect form is in possession of the House. I can assure this House that while there is an error in Clause 239 subsection 2, In the English version, this bill was in its final form when it was introduced and read a first time. I would like to draw to the attention of members a Speaker's ruling respecting imperfect bills. In January 1987, a point of order was alleged that there were two imperfections in a government bill, specifically... Sorry about that, Madam Speaker. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I didn't even hear it. In January of 1987, a point of order was alleged that there were two imperfections in a government bill, specifically that a blank occurred where a sessional paper number should have appeared and a memorandum of understanding was not contained in the bill. The Speaker ruled that these anomalies did not render the bill imperfect with respect to Standing Order 68, subsection 3. I would suggest to the member that anyone would be hard-pressed to name one government that could claim to have an immaculate legislative agenda that did not contain any errors. In fact, the House has a process to correct these errors in statutes. The Miscellaneous Statutes Law Amendment Program, which was established by the Department of Justice in 1975, is a periodic legislative exercise administered by the legislation section of the Department of Justice. It is used to correct anomalies, inconsistencies, outdated terminology, or errors in federal statutes. The reason that this program was established is that mistakes do happen. In the case before the House, this error was identified during the second reading stage, and as a result, this could be fixed during clause-by-clause consideration of the bill in committee. That is what the government intends to do, Madam Speaker. I would like to state that the proper course of action in these situations is to report an error of this nature to the minister responsible or responsible parliamentary secretary. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, that did not occur. The member making a comment during the debate to a government member just doesn't suffice. In conclusion, I submit that Bill C-19 is in proper form and that the government will address the inconsistency during clause-by-clause consideration of the bill in committee. Thank you for the time, Madam Speaker.
Thank the honourable member for the comments, and we will add them to consideration for the Speaker. L'honorable député de Louis-Saint-Laurent.
The member for Louis-Saint-Laurent.
To thank the honourable colleague for his position. We welcome the fact that the government takes it very seriously, as our member from Mission, Metaskwe, Fraser Canyon did, as a very, very good MP, working hard to be sure that our job is doing met concretely. Alors, Madame la Présidente, je tiens à remercier.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the member, the parliamentary secretary, for tabling the government's version on the point we raised through the member for Mission, Metaskwe, Fraser Canyon. And he has worked very well to make sure that the work we do as parliamentarians is done rigorously. We understand that the point raised was essential, so we're waiting for your decision, Madam Speaker. We will take that issue under consideration and come back to the House.
Tabling of documents. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm messing up. No. Yeah, tabling of the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Queen's Privy Council.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Pursuant to Standing Order 36, bracket 8A, I have the honour to table in both official languages the government's responses to 5 petitions. These returns will be tabled in an electronic format.
Introduction of government bills. Statements by ministers. Rapport de délégation
Reports from interparliamentary delegations. Presenting reports from committees, the honourable member for Mississauga East, Cooksville.
Madam Speaker, I have the honour to present in both official languages the 4th report of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and